Hey, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. We're just going to give everyone a minute or two to find their way into today's broadcast. So if you just want to stand by, we'll probably get going at 2 minutes past the hour. Just want to let everybody know we're giving the session a minute or two to get started so everyone has an opportunity to get into the session. If you want, we'll be getting going in just a minute or so.
If y'all want to drop in the chat, let us know where you're tuning in from. Would love to see who we have in this webinar today. Oh, nice Colorado. What's the weather like there? Is it warm? Oh, warm and sunny, beautiful. I think we're supposed to get some sun. I'm in New Jersey, and I hear today's supposed to go up to 70. So I'm really looking forward to that. Netherlands, awesome.
All right. I think we're about ready to get started. Lisa, what do you think?
I'm ready to go.
All right, awesome. Well, hey, welcome everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us in this conversation about the Seismic and Highspot merger. What does it mean for revenue enablement? We're going to be going over today what the merger means for the revenue enablement space. Obviously, two large companies like this making a decision to join forces has a lot of implications. We want to dive into not just what those implications are, but like why is this happening and what does it tell us about the shape of the market and how is it evolving over time? Today, I am joined by Lisa from Justworks. Lisa, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Thanks, Ian. Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Tricarico. I'm a manager of go-to-market readiness at Justworks, so really deep in the enablement space. So, a little bit about Justworks and who we are, what we do. Justworks is a tech-forward company that supports small and medium businesses with hiring and onboarding employees, paying them, giving them access to benefits, even paying employees internationally. So we really focus on that small, medium business, but super complex topic. So having a strong enablement platform is critical to our success.
It's awesome. Thanks, Lisa. And I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Spekit. We're also in the revenue enablement space, which is why we have a fair amount to think about when it comes to a merger like this or any changes in the direction of the market. Now, Lisa, at Justworks, you're not just a Spekit customer. You've had some experience with some of these other platforms and migrated over. We'll probably get more into this, but do you want to give us just like a little flavor for what that experience was like?
Yeah, we were using Highspot for 3 years prior to making the switch to Spekit. And one thing I will say, it was a really easy transition to Spekit, but we just kind of started to reevaluate what the tool stack that we had for our employees and also the needs of our employees, right? We were looking at Highspot and the tool that we're using and saying, does this actually serve the purpose of what we're looking for? Does it meet the way we need to get information to our teams and matching the velocity that our product is expanding, and kind of made us think we might want to see what else is out there and find a solution that actually does match what we're looking for.
Yeah, I think that's a theme that we're going to see come up again and again is the actual like foundations of the industry are starting to shift. And so the merger that we're seeing, and not just this merger, a number of changes in the market are really a symptom of the changing, structure of what we see out there for revenue enablement and other sort of RevOps tool stacks. And really what we're seeing is a pattern of legacy solutions doing consolidation. So over the last couple of years, we've seen, for example, MediaFly and Apnium getting acquired. We saw Clary and SalesLoft joining together to create sort of a unified revenue AI and data layer. Last year, also, a private equity firm brought Big Tin Can and Showpad together and merged them. And of course, that culminated with Seismic and Highspot this year announcing their intent to merger. This is announced back in February. They're going through the sort of regulatory process right now, but obviously signaled a continuing trend of consolidation of major vendors in the space.
Yeah, I found this one so shocking. I think anybody in enablement has heard of Highspot and Seismic, right? There's no question really. But then hearing that they were merging was like definitely a shock to me. And if you think they were such leaders in the game, like why do they have to now merge, right? Why can't they thrive on their own? So those were the questions I started having as I saw that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a question like why come together? Why join forces? And I think we might be able to ascertain some idea of this. And what we see basically is when these organizations start to come together is a very similar language set that you hear about like things like both platforms will continue to be supported. So you see this with, Clarion Sales Loft, talking about how they haven't settled on a name, but they want to create this sort of like unified thing. But there's a risk of bifurcation. Forrester cited this when they were talking about it. Big Team, Tin Can, and Showpad were talking about how they were committed to supporting customers during their current journey, but it doesn't mean that necessarily they've made the hard decisions that come into how do we actually like rationalize this tech stack with a lot of overlap. And I think that's happening again when we look at Seismic and Highspot, where both platforms in the press release are talking about, both being supported moving forward, including after the transaction is complete. But I think there's some open questions of what does that really mean when there's like so much overlap in the technology stacks. They both have CMS and LMS capabilities and analytics capabilities. And so I think that we are expecting some amount of rationalizing across any of these acquisitions when we have product overlap, and it'll be for us to determine how that really plays out in the market over time. And so next we kind of ask, what's driving the merger? And, basically I would say that there's a couple of major reasons organizations come together in the technology space. One of them is because they have some technology they want to acquire. So for example, Seismic acquired Lessonly a few years ago and brought them into their tech stack. But sometimes it's really about, competitive advantage and financial modeling and so on. And both Seismic and Highspot, obviously really great competitors in the space, really enjoy going up against them. And in many ways, they help define what revenue enablement means today and have brought a tremendous amount of value throughout their history to the entire space. And when we look at like, hey, what's been happening? Where's their success curve been? We can see that they've been able to raise a significant amount of money because they've had the growth rate and they've had the interesting technology. Seismic, now around since 2010, has overall raised over $440 million during that tenure. And just a few years ago, they brought Permira in as their private equity company. They did recently take on some convertible debt, meaning like this isn't like real debt, it's like a line of credit, maybe is a better way to think about it, to give them the flexibility to take actions in the market. And a former CEO a new CEO has come in from Oracle, Rob Tarkoff, just before the merger announcement. Highspot likewise has seen a lot of success. Founded around the same time, 2011, they've raised over $650 million. They did a little restructuring a couple of years ago, and we've heard that they've raised a little bit more money coming into 2025. So both companies driving significant value in the market, growing substantially, raising a lot of capital. And the reason we bring this up is what can happen to organizations that have such, significant valuations. They can reach points where competing the way they always have and going head to head is limiting their ability to grow, and are now looking at, hey, how do we bring the customer bases together as opposed to bringing the technology stacks together? And we think, my recommendation, my idea here, this is like an analysis that I would provide to you, is that ultimately organizations that come together, whether it's Seismic or Highspot or anyone else, want to find a way to rationalize their technology stack so they're having the most efficient use of their capital as they deploy value for their customers. And so we should expect after the merger that Seismic and Highspot are going to have to do some thinking about how do they want to construct a new technology stack and a new product suite that is going to make sense for their customers after the merger.
Yeah, and Ian, as you were saying, like they founded both around the same time, and they were kind of like leaders in the game, right? They were very innovative at the time when they founded and launched this enablement platform with the ability to share resources with prospects and customers and have buyer analytics and all of that. Like it was innovative at that time, but they kind of like grew, and then other people came into the game and started to think differently about how to approach enablement, and they didn't make that change, that shift, I think, as quickly as maybe they should have. Maybe got a little comfortable in where they were at and how they were growing, and it kind of now it came to a head where like they have to really rethink the approach of the platforms. And like you said, maybe it's easier to come together, bring that customer group together rather than spending time and money on individually updating their platforms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about the challenge of like building these stacks over time with the rapid pace of technological change we're currently going through, not just in our industry, across every technology industry. And so as they do this rationalization, this is what it might look like. This is, a trend that you might see in many types of acquisitions like this over time, which is in the initial, post-merger phase, figuring out the organizational restructuring. How do we communicate with our customers to tell them that there's going to be a continuation of service and quality? How do we get the CSM and support teams reorganized to support the broader customer base? How do we get accounts owned and like think about territory assignments and alignment? And in theory, start going through that process of figuring out that technology platform decision making. There's a lot to integrate here. From if Seismic, if you think about Seismic acquiring from Highspot, Seismic is keeping the name, is keeping the CEO, keeping the private equity firm. Highspot's got like 100 customers that have to get digested. That's a big merger that has to come together. And there's a lot to go through the organizational like rationalization or alignment. And then we would see like in the middle term, months 6 to 12, figuring out those integration priorities, engineering bandwidth, how are we going to like deploy engineering in order to integrate the story, roadmap items. You get this competition between like, hey, are we building the roadmap? Are we building the integration? And if we have technologies that are not the go forward solution, what happens to those engineering resources? One platform would continue to start seeing more investment, and pricing conversations can continue to shift. We'll talk a little bit later for a moment about what this might mean from a negotiation perspective.
Yeah, I
And
think
then
it's safe to
finally,
say. Oh, sorry, to cut you up there. But I was going to say, like, as I'm thinking about it, and I'm hearing you say this, like, it's safe to say it's not like something that's going to happen overnight. And like, I imagine myself as an admin on one of these, using one of these tools, like, as those companies are going through the shift, then also the shift that impacts my team as well, which is like something that would be definitely a challenge.
yeah, for sure it would be. And then in the year after, we probably start seeing more of those structural decisions land, where we start coming clean and clear about migration, feature rationalization, trying to get back into innovation and away from merger. And using the leverage of now being this much larger organization with a much larger customer base, and not necessarily having that competitor that was always in the deals with you, pushing you on price and service. So that's like maybe what we can expect over the next 12 to 24 months. What do acquisitions like this normally look like, and how do they play out? And what does this mean for your team? Well, there's a few things to consider. One, you're trying to figure out which platform survives. As I mentioned, the combined company is going to be called Seismic. It's keeping the Seismic CEO, it's keeping the Seismic private equity firm. I think that's sending us certain signals in the market about the more likely play, but this is a decision that they will have to make over time as they bring the organizations and the technology stack together. If you are a customer of one of these platforms, you should be trying to seek as much clarity as you can on long-term support for your platform that you're investing in, and have a question, like openly question where the stability of implementation, integrations, and roadmap is going to land. Integration lag can be real. It can take a long time to bring these solutions together and fully integrate them. Lessonly took a while for Seismic to bring in and like fully integrate into their tech stack before. You should expect that just anytime there's large technology stacks coming together. There's a difficult process to bring them together, not endemic or specific to these companies, it's just the way it works. And so think about what that process of alignment is going to do to your other business requirements you have for that company. And one of those is roadmap freeze. We can expect engineering shifts from building integrations and net new innovation to slow down. We can expect the new capabilities being delivered to potentially be impacted. Gartner, you can go to Gartner's website and just like search for seismic high-spot merger, and there's like a very little note that's publicly available that sort of like warns everyone about expecting slower innovation and being careful about long-term commitments during this transition until you have clarity. And then pricing and leverage. Obviously, Seismic and Highspot went head-to-head in many deals, and that would have pressure on like pricing, service levels, et cetera, that the customer could use. And you can expect that to start changing the dynamic when you're working with the joint co, because that head-to-head competitor is not necessarily going to be there.
Yeah, it's a lot of things to consider. And I think what I find really interesting, or what's like top of mind to me, is like the integration and the roadmap freeze. Because as I've seen with these platforms, again, like I said, they were super innovative, but they are kind of really lacking some of the new ways of technology, the new ways people are learning, that just in time, or like that AI features that help to maybe update content, create content, organize content, share content, all of that good stuff, which is what seems to be like lacking from the platforms currently, and where they need to like really step up. And now they're going to be coming together. And are they going to make those industry changes to the adjustments to their platform? Maybe, but like it's something you're going to see in the next couple months, maybe not, right? And that's when you want to see those things. That's when stay competitive and to really meet the companies that they support. That's something I think that they really need to focus on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if there's any time that the pace of innovation is high, it's like right now with AI adoption and AI driving, so much change in the market. So yeah, it'll be a tough time to go through this process, but something that they will inevitably have to do because they're bringing together these two technologies. So there's some questions that you can be asking if you are either already a customer of one of these companies, if you're thinking about being a customer of one of these companies. The questions like, hey, what architecture is going to be the foundation for the combined company? Like, what's really the go-forward platform here? What happens to existing roadmap commitments? Who is going to own them? Like, is there going to be somebody on the hook for promises or commitments made before the acquisition? What does the combined product look like for reps in their daily workflow? Can you see what this new thing is going to look like? Or is it just sort of like, well, what you have now, but maybe you get supported? How will your customer support relationships change? How will that adapt? Should you expect the same service levels you've had in the past? And what are the contractual protections if integrations, roadmaps, or other things impact your business ultimately? These are some really good questions to ask. I will point out that everybody who's attending today is going to get what we call a digital sales room, a deal room that's going to have links to various things. And one of those assets is this asset here on the left, questions to ask before you decide anything. 21 questions to just consider before you make any further commitments related to this merger that will help you go through the decision-making process.
Yeah, and as I've seen with any type of merger, or even my experience with vendors that we use that merge, right? They're going to obviously want to give you the trust and confidence in them that the service models won't change, or the product experience, will only improve and it won't impact your day-to-day function. So I just would encourage you all to ask any follow-up questions that are really important and relevant to your business, to make sure that you are getting the answers that you need so that you can make the best informed decision of like what is the right step for you and your company, whether it is still moving forward with one of these products, renewing or not, or looking into something else. Go in there, have this list of questions, other ones that are pertaining to your company, and also compare the different vendors that you speak to on these same questions to see how they respond, and make sure that like you're finding the solution that does really meet your needs.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point, Lisa. Thank you. So where are you in this process? So if you're attending this webinar, you obviously have interest in this space. You may be a customer or you may be evaluating one of these vendors. And depending where you are, I'd recommend a couple of different ways to think about it. So if you're approaching a renewal, you have a lot of leverage right now. Obviously, any vendors that are merging or going through an acquisition want to minimize the risk of their customers being disrupted and then leaving them. So there's going to be a lot of pressure, a lot of incentives to try to get you to commit to multi-year commitments. And this is just sort of like, hey, your moment to make sure that you're protecting yourself. We would recommend not just us, but in that Gartner article I mentioned earlier, hey, prefer single-year commits, single-year renewals during this period, so you have clarity about the go-forward technology. It's a good way to defend yourself. It's also a really great time to identify alternatives that may have short migration windows that can help you manage this transition more easily. You may have thought that, hey, we were just going right ahead and we're going to be renewing. with either Seismic or Highspot, but there may be a way for you to migrate off if you feel like this disruption is unlikely to be sustainable for your business.
Yeah. I want to touch on approaching renewals really quickly, because I think that was something I actually had encountered. And we only had, I think, 2 months to make a change and make a decision. So it is possible. Obviously it requires you to move quick, but when we were in the situation and we had to say, like, is this the right decision for us to stay? And I mean, this was even pre-merger, but it was the right decision for us to stay. What's the risks of us staying? What's the risks of us leaving and transitioning off? And like, it is possible. And at the end goal is always like making the right decision for you and your company and your employees that you're supporting. So just wanted to add that little tidbit.
Yeah, that's great. No, it's absolutely true. There are solutions today, including Spekit. Obviously, we feel we can help companies get migrated off really quickly. Ourselves and others may also be able to offer buyouts to make the transition more easy. So make sure you're evaluating your options. It's a great time to see what you can get from the market today. If you're mid-contract, you have a year or two to go, you have time, use it, evaluate what your options are. What does your data look like? Can you move it out if you need to? Understand their platform migrations and what they're doing. It can be useful to start those parallel evaluations. If there's a period of uncertainty ahead of you, but you're under contractual obligation, it can be a good time to start getting a feel for what's available in the market, even if you made commitments years ago. And if you're evaluating right now, just be aware that market conditions have changed. We're going to be talking in a moment about the nature of those changes in the market. And it's a good time to just evaluate, what does state of the art look like when it comes to revenue enablement. It is different than what the answer would have been even 5 years ago. There's been a lot of transition with new technologies and new ways of servicing the rep and making them successful than were available for us just a short time ago. All right. So that's all like the nitty gritty. What's going on with the merger? What's up with that? What's driving it? And what should you be doing to think about it? And now we want to shift a little bit and talk about what's driving this market's transformation. All of these consolidations are kind of happening for a reason. Lisa, you kind of talked about it a little bit when you were saying, like, hey, great innovation, new architectures driving lots of value into the market back in 2010, 2011, and actually for a very long time after that. But we're seeing a number of shifts. I'd like to go through, to start the conversation with like 5 key shifts. And one of them is we're just seeing massively accelerated product velocity driving continuous change. The pace at which product and engineering teams are now moving is driving a huge amount of transformation in go-to-market teams and how they have to react. We're going to dive into this a little bit more. The second one is all tooling pretty much has moved into the browser. Like the Chrome browser has won it. Like, that's where everything's happening. You're going to be in your web page. You're going to be going to these different applications. And what that means is there is now a unified interface that everything is happening on. And so if you need to drive value, you're no longer trapped in your own silo or portal or desktop application. You can be there in the browser on the web page with people as they're using it. Number 3, even though we've had all this innovation, we've built all these technologies out, we're seeing that 65% of sales content consistently goes unused. And what we repeatedly hear in the market is legacy enablement faces real critical utilization barriers, meaning the reps that are supposed to gain the benefit from these tools are struggling to adopt them, or the enablement team are struggling to get them to adopt them. And you see behaviors like they just go into Slack and ask everybody for what they need instead of actually using the tools the way they're designed.
It's so funny you say that. We still are moving our teams off of trying to lean into Slack. It becomes like the easy way, right? And I think that's the thing. Everybody's looking for the easiest solution, like the path of least resistance. And Slack feels like that, right? But it doesn't have to be. It shouldn't be the solution, right? The tool should be the solution. And I think that, like, how can we take the friction out of like our reps day to day and give them the information and the resources they need in a better way and encourage them to utilize that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another thing that's changed, right? This utilization, the way that everybody utilizes things is really transforming because AI is activating new solution modalities. We call this like just-in-time enablement at Spekit, is the ability for us to be in the moment with the rep and have the AI being proactive. This is a new modality that just wasn't possible before. And then finally, content requirements are skyrocketing. The amount of content, transformation, updates, and edits that is required for enablement teams today is incredible. And you need tooling and infrastructure that helps you not only keep pace, but have it governed and make sure that that remains trusted, accurate, up-to-date content. And so these 5 transformations we think are really dramatically changing the way that every technology industry works, but especially revenue enablement. And that's causing the shift in behavior that we're seeing from companies like Seismic and Highspot, Big Tin Can and Showpad, legacy architectures that are really struggling. Lisa, you had mentioned you had started to face some of these challenges as well, and that led to a migration away from a legacy platform. Maybe you can give a little bit more of this. So we're going to talk about like how did these legacy platforms get built up? How do we end up in this spot? And what's the challenges today? But it sounds like you were going through those challenges live at Justworks, trying to service your reps.
Yeah, we definitely experienced these challenges, and I wasn't part of the team that initially implemented it in our tech stack about 3 years ago, but I started to get involved and sat in a QBR, and they were sharing about our lack of usage, and I was like, that's not great, right? Our team, there's all this amazing content that the teams need to be able to share externally with our customers, and the fact they weren't using it was like a red flag. So I started digging a little bit deeper, got to know the platform better, realizing like it's a destination they have to go to, like they have to go to Highspot to get the content they needed. So like I'm like that extra click, we all know one click can make all the difference. I'm like, that's a challenge. And on top of that, it was like all that we really primarily what we had in there was like just externally facing content. So it was more like a document like platform for us, like a document sharing platform for those that did use it. So I started to see what else was out there because I'm like, we still have reps, not being able to, not having a place to enterprise, not having a place to like even learn and like also have content that helps them to do their job better, and start to see what else was out there. And I also, one thing I did look into as I was in the process of evaluating a lot of tools, seeing Spekit, seeing the way it was at just in time, how it lived on the side of the websites our reps commonly use, like really stood out to me. And I went back to Highspot and I said, I see that other companies are doing this. Do you have a feature that's similar? And they had suggested, oh, well, we can add this tile in Salesforce. And then I was like, okay, we don't need anything else in Salesforce. Like this still is not going to really resolve the problems that we have. So, I did like really try to see, could we make better use of the tool we already have? But I came to the conclusion that it just wasn't meeting us where we were at. And the way that, Justworks is growing, Ian also mentioned that like even internal teams at companies are moving faster. Our product team in the past would take them, sometimes weeks to build certain product updates and launches. And we had a launch that happened in like 3 weeks, which is like, unheard of for them, right? So they're also using AI to code and do things like that. And so they're pushing products out faster. We then ship out the enablement resources to our team faster. And we needed something that was just like, reduce any possible friction in the process.
Yeah, that's great. And I think this is something people have struggled with for a long time, is like tools built to solve the problem are kind of like now getting in the way of solving the real problem. And one of the reasons for that is if we think about how these legacy enablement platforms developed, is that there are sort of layers that got stacked on top of each other. Portal-based foundations. Hey, we're going to create a content management system. We're going to put all your sales content in it. Then it's going to be like, well, which of that is being used? And we're going to layer some analytics on it. And then we're going to be like, oh, okay, we want to do some like learning and education. So we're going to layer learning and training. And then we're going to layer workflow integration so we can, try to be supporting people who are doing things. And now most recently layering on AI. How do we put AI in front of these layers to try to drive a communication gap? But all of these are in this like portal-based foundation. And so, Lisa, you're talking about, I think, a lot of these legacy vendors have these like Salesforce integrations where it's a tab in Salesforce, but it's a tab in Salesforce and it's still just like taking you to the portal. And all of this stuff is happening somewhere else. The learning is happening somewhere else. The coaching is happening somewhere else. And I think that if we have one sort of insight at Spekit, when we were founded by Melanie Fillet, it was this idea that learning, education, enablement happen best where people execute. But what's happening, and I think that you have a really great perspective on this, is that the reps are just like suffocating in change today. This is like the velocity is so different. It's changing to like a change in state and how teams can even work.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of bounces off that point I mentioned before about like how our product teams are building faster. So they're using AI powered tools, they're building faster because we also have to meet the velocity and growth of our competitors, right? Our competitors are doing the exact same thing. Like we're all in this race to show up the best for the customers and be that like solution that people turn to. And because of that, reps have to learn more faster. They and think about it, right? Sometimes, you might in a past traditional way of enablement, my initial approach was always like, take this e-learning course for knowledge, then join this workshop for that behavior change, then let's do a certification. That would take them off the floors for, maybe 2 to 3 hours, in a month for enablement, where we don't have the time to do that. And with so many launches, it's just nearly impossible. So as a result, like we had to make the switch of like, how can people get the information that they need, like the right audience at the right time, grabbing the right message that they need to be successful and to support, the prospects and customers they're speaking with, because of the velocity of change under the current landscape in the enablement world and the industry in general.
Yeah. And this transformation is just going to get worse, right? And it's a feedback cycle because we have AI making product and engineering teams twice as fast, 5 times as fast, 10 times as fast. Like who knows where that's going to stop. Go-to-market teams were already not able to keep up. And now they're just ramping up faster. But that means your competition is doing the same thing. And now the competition is releasing their new products and capabilities at an incredible pace. And so what's the reaction that most organizations have? We need more stuff. Let's deploy new technology. Let's deploy more AI. Let's deploy more stuff. And then, of course, enablement teams, marketing teams, everybody is like, well, we need a new message, a new play, whatever. Cycle is just like spinning up like a hurricane. It's just getting in faster and faster. Reps in the middle. And so we have all of this AI, all of this technology, all of these new capabilities, and yet the results are not moving. In the last years, despite all the ability to deliver more products faster to market, win rates have only gone from 28% to 30%. Reps are only hitting quota 46% of the time, and the average annual growth rate 16%. We're basically seeing stagnant process on the core measures that organizations really care about, even though we seem to be delivering more product, more technology, more assistance into the reps. And I think that's largely because we are approaching new problems with old solutions. And so we have this question. Oh, you got it, Lisa? Go for it.
I'll take this one away because I think it's really important and something that like I feel really strongly about, and something that we had to make the adjustment at Justworks about as well. Like in one place, a legacy enablement, it's like you file it away. The resources just live there, and reps have to go searching for it, right? Searching for it when they get a question that they have to answer, versus like getting the information that they need wherever they need it all the time, always accessible, like right at the palm of their hand, so they don't have to go searching for anything. Also just like, again, passive hunting and searching, but also self-servicing, looking for things, versus like this proactive approach of them being pushed content that they need, maybe at the right time, maybe at a certain process in the Salesforce during a certain stage, right, where they're getting that suggested material and information. And also sometimes these flat files that exist, maybe there's lack of updating and governance, which is a huge problem. So a platform that has the knowledge base, that has information and reminders on when to update resources, and making sure that there's the right governance in place. And then, of course, content that doesn't like grow with the company and the changes, right? Static things. We had e-learning courses that for years like kind of stayed the same unless like there was some content adjustments. Whereas, something that's a little bit more dynamic, that can be updated and changed. And as the industry changes or enablement styles and strategies change, you also are able to do that really quickly and efficiently. We need to think about, like I mentioned before, it felt innovative when we were giving teams e-learning courses, workshops, and certifications, until we realized that really wasn't what they needed. And also, you taught them at one time, maybe we taught them it in January, but they're not even having a conversation with somebody who might benefit from that product until March, right? They're not going to recall all that information that we trained them on a couple months ago and took time out of them on the floor just working and selling. So really, like, it has changed from the legacy enablement strategy, and like these modern requirements are necessary for teams. No, we didn't know if you wanted to add anything onto that.
Want to share like how, got me okay?
Sorry.
Yeah, I've been froze up there for a second. So yeah, I think that these are exactly the things that are driving a lot of the decision making that comes to Spekit and how we're building. And if you go through each of them, you can think about like if you have a solution, if you're going to build your own solution, if you're using, maybe you want to be using Glean or using like Microsoft Copilot and you want to like build your own solution for your reps, it's totally valid. But these are the kinds of like challenges you need to think through about how to deploy. And I just want to like take another swipe through these and talk about like why these are the most critical decisions you can be making about your rep performance infrastructure today. Everywhere and all the time, if you are not with the rep in the deal, the rep is going to be forced to scramble and try to recall. And being in the deal is the way that you make sure the content and material that you need is with them when they need it. Otherwise, you're relying on the rep to go find it. And that leads to the second item where you have to be proactive and in the flow of work. If you're not being proactive, you're relying on the rep to even know they're supposed to ask the question, to even know they're supposed to go look for the thing. So you need to make sure that when you get the signals about what their operation is, they're prepping a call, they're writing an email, they're evaluating a deal, that you're pushing the content proactively to them, the content, the enablement, the learning, whatever that is, in the moment, so that it's going to be connected to the job that needs to be done. Otherwise, again, you're relying on them to go find it themselves. They start spamming email, they start spamming Slack, and you no longer are in control of the message that they're receiving. The third thing is semantic go-to-market knowledge. I think that one of the biggest challenges we've seen from portal-based approaches is that content just consistently goes in. It becomes, you said this, Lisa, it just becomes another file repository, a bit of a pain of a file repository because you're supposed to go in and like tag everything and like file it away appropriately so it becomes useful. What you really need is you need to be thinking, and this is where the power of AI is really transforming things. How do we use AI to construct a semantic structural understanding of the business? Like, what are your deal stages? What are your flags? What are your competition? What are your products? How do we construct that in a way that a human thinks about it? So when that human, the rep, is going about their business, the information that's floating to them is going to be current, it's going to be accurate, it's going to be trustworthy. And that leads to the next thing, which is content sometimes just goes into these repositories to die. It just sits there, taking up space, but also kind of polluting the freshness and reality because you have old content that's out of date. And you need to be able to be generating dynamic content, both for your internal audiences and your external audiences at a really elevated speed because you have to be able to move so fast. So I think, thank you, Lisa, for your like perspective on these. This is like my perspective about like, these are the things you need to solve if you're going to be driving modern sales enablement. And obviously that's why at Spekit, we've built our platform around these ideas. We really get focused on rep acceleration. How do we take reps, help them ramp fast, win fast, and stay fast? And we think about it as three categories: rep efficiency. How can they move faster if we just give them everything they need in their flow of work, from tools, from assets, from automated coaching, from automated tooling? Second, we think about speed of closing. How can you help deals move faster by making sure the right content is delivered to the buyer and the entire buyer committee at the right time? And we think about staying fast. How do you make sure your reps stay current with scalable go-to-market readiness throughout their life cycle with all of the change you're pushing? New products, new messages, new plays, new processes, new technologies. How do you get that to them as seamlessly as possible?
Yeah, and in a way, it's not overwhelming as well, right? Because they have a lot of things that they're doing. Like a rep is, not only do they have to like stay up to date on everything, but there's also, a sales process they have to follow, sales methodology they have to follow. They've got to go through all these steps, and we do health underwriting and workers' comp and all these other really tactical things as well. So this shouldn't be, we want something that takes away like anything that could make them feel, bogged down with all of the work and all of the changes, and something that really just helps them move faster, like you said, Ian, but not in a way that feels overwhelming.
Yeah, exactly that. There's so much. It's very easy to feel overwhelmed. We call it suffocating with change, and you've got to make sure that you're delivering real value to them in real time. One more slide here before we jump into a live share and then some questions. Just sort of like, hey, how do we think about the problem? Yeah, we want to ramp fast, swim fast, stay fast. We think this is really critical about unified deal context. How do you surface information about the calls, information about the deal, information about the opportunity and account to the rep? Again, everywhere, anywhere they are, how do we surface that and make sure they've got the tooling they need? Go-to-market knowledge. This goes beyond content management. How do we make sure that you're really rooted in what the business is? Contextual coaching and actions. Take both of those things together. Deal context, go-to-market context, deliver the right thing to the rep. And finally, personalized buyer experiences. How do we make sure that we're communicating effectively, accurately, with the right information to reps? What we want to do now is Lisa would love to show you a little bit about how this comes together. And again, this is, yes, a Spekit product demo, but really I think it's illuminating if you want to understand, hey, where are things going? How should you be thinking about these connections of content, context, and rep acceleration if you are working with any vendor or you're thinking about building your own? After we do the demo, we're going to take some questions. So if you do have questions, please start putting them into the Q&A box in your interface for Goldcast here. We would love to take a look at them. Lisa's going to share her screen for a few minutes, and then we'll take questions. So Lisa, over to you.
Thank you, Ian. Yeah, so I'm really excited just to show you the platform. And I think it's important to see because, one, as myself, I'm a very visual learner. That's how I like to learn. But also, I think, conceptually, you hear about this, like information at the right time, when they need it. And you're like, how does that actually work? When I first even heard about Spekit as we were still, kind of thinking about what we're going to do with Highspot, I heard about it has a sidekick. You can ask it questions, and I just didn't really understand it until I saw it, and I was like, oh, that's what we're looking for. So this is kind of like the back end. In here, I also call it like the brain of the platform. And you could really formulate this and build this however you want it to be. This is like more of a demo environment, but with Justworks like real content, just so you all can see it. And again, you could make this whatever works best for you. But right here, we have like these two main topics. And within the topic, there are subtopics. So it's a Justworks Sales Hub. It has, an overview of who we are, a video. Now, this is like internal just for reps to get that foundational information. We've got great sales training resources, maybe latest updates, quick links. And it's broken down a couple different ways, like what we sell, who we sell, how we sell. And within each of these subtopics, you can create subtopics, right? So you can have a lot of different content. The great thing about Spekit is that it is fully integrated for us with Confluence, where we actually store all of our knowledge-based resources, as well as Google Drive. And you can also build and create your own content, like something you're seeing here as well. And the best part too with Confluence and Google Drive, it does automatically update, which I really love. So any changes we make in Confluence goes right to Spekit. So you'll see, like as an example, one of our partners is Electric. So we highlight that, and we have some key Electric AI integration content. Now, the web platform is awesome. It has a lot of resources. It's where you move and organize content. But I think the real power is in the little Spekit sidekick. Now you see it has this fun little Justworks J, but it would be branding for whatever your company is. So it won't feel like a separate resource for your teams because it'll have your own branding. So they will have access to the web app, but they don't need to go there because a lot of it lives right here in the sidekick. So I could ask it a question as a rep, like, what is Electric AI? Maybe I forgot. Someone's mentions, oh, I saw this on your website. And I'm like, oh, what is that integration again? Well, it's going to pull all the information from the back end and gives me that key information I need to know. It's a leading IT management platform, helps automated onboarding and offboarding. And it also gives resources. So it helps to validate for your rep that this is the correct information. This is where they got it from. And they could also go and click on that and access that information. Additionally, like are some legacy platforms, I know it's really great for resource sharing. So if I wanted to look specifically for an Electric resource, I could type it in here. This is like when I'm searching for something specific. I'm looking for a file. I know we have, I might be thinking, I know I have a couple one-sheeters I can share. So then I get to see them. So we have electric solutions, pricing tier, maybe my customer that I'm speaking to is curious about the cost. Well, I might want to share it with them externally. Now, I don't know how your reps or how your team currently shares content. Maybe you do have a legacy platform. Maybe you don't have any platform at all. And right now they're like downloading things and saving it to their desktops, which could, of course, lead to content that might be out of date. But I know it's in here and it's up to date because it was put here 2 weeks ago, right? So there's some confidence in that. But also, instead of just sharing a link externally, a downloaded resource to an email where it could get lost for an admin, it's really easy to create a deal room. So if I wanted to add it to a deal room, I could either, search for a deal room I previously have, or I can create a brand new deal room. And it's connected to your CRM. So the deal room buyer analytics, whether they bring pipeline value or help to close ARR, you're able to see that based on the connection to Salesforce. Not going to go through fully here, but you'll be able to like search and add the company here. It will give a company logo, and you could do a nice color and everything, and you could choose how to be notified. And easily you could just add that link to the deal room, and it could be something that you could continue to add as you continue to to speak with that prospect or customer and determine, what they need and what could help them maybe close the deal. On top of that, I mean, I could go on, but there's now learning paths as well that can be created. You can do knowledge checks. So another great thing is that you're able to test your team's knowledge, use it as an enablement platform. And then we also, of course, have the awesome analytics as well. I do also want to preface now, obviously, this is a little bit of demo so that we don't have any information in here, but my team has had access to Spekit for about 3 months now. And I think we have over like 3,000 or 4,000 sidekick chats, over 7,000 views of content, which has been really awesome to see. But you're able to look at all the analytics and also see, what questions are people asking. So it also helps to kind of figure out like what are those gaps that they have in content or things that they need to know. And also the last thing I will say, and Ian, you can also cover anything else I might have missed, but you can personalize the content for teams. So at Justworks, we have over 20 customer-facing personas. We don't have all 20 in Spekit just yet. We're getting there. But the information that I have shared with my account executive team is a bit different from the account development team, from our customer success manager team, from our sales specialist team, right? There's foundational content they all need, but our CSM team does not need the Salesforce selling stages. Our AEs need that, right? So I'm able to move content around and give the people the right content that they need at the right time.
Yeah, that's great, Lisa. And obviously it scratches the surface of an entire platform that's meant to support sales reps, also sales leadership, customer success teams, marketing, product marketing, and so on. And so it's, and of course, our core audience, enablement professionals who are trying to drive success with those reps. And obviously, we'd love to, share more to anybody who's interested to learn about it. Also going to share in a minute a link to the book that our founder wrote about just-in-time enablement in the future that in part actually predicted consolidation in our market. So it's a great book that came out last year that I think really talks a lot about how things are transforming. With that, I think we can move over to some questions. I've got four, maybe six here kicking us off. So the first one is, how do you see the evolving MCP server client trend impacting the future? Well, I think it's a really great question. So I think whether it's like MCP specifically as a technology, I think there's a lot of conversation in technical circles now. Is it MCP or APIs or a combination of both? But basically, there's this idea that as we move increasingly to an agentic world and AI tooling being able to talk to other systems, that these systems have to be able to talk to each other, and we need to be able to share that. So certainly an important element for us is the ingress and egress of data. Like, how do we share our insights that we built up in our go-to-market knowledge base with other platforms that need it? And how do we consume that information? So for example, late last year, we released a fairly deep integration with Gong, where we are able to pull call intelligence records directly into our interface and make sure that sellers always know what happened in the latest calls with the deal that they're working on. And that is today driven by API, but we certainly see a future where both sides have MCP capabilities that are able to more dynamically get the right information that they need. And where we think this ultimately goes is organizations that build out sort of like vertically integrated AI tooling that then have like structural understanding of the content. It's not just content. It's that, from our perspective, for example, what we would work on is like, do we understand what a competitor is? Do we understand who those competitors are? Do we understand how we compete against those competitors? So if you're a company that's using Spekit, for example, you could have another solution that asks and interrogates that data for any use case you have. So I think what it ultimately means is better layers of interaction and more tools that are able to drive more value across the organization. But it can't be just sort of like a vacuum that just like sucks up all the data and you hope that it comes out. It needs to have like some structural insight.
Yeah, I'm actually really looking forward to that too. I was going to say, just because, I think any other enablement leader on here can agree with me and align on the sentiment that it's almost challenging sometimes to measure enablement effectiveness because data is living in so many different places. You've got the Salesforce data, we've got whatever enablement tool data that you're using. I don't know if you're using Zendesk data, Gong, all of it is like living in separate worlds. And you're trying to take it and how do I bring this all together and be able to tell one cohesive story? Like this enablement program was effective because it was spoken about this many times. It brought this much ARR in. Our teams were supported because they all did XYZ enablement resource or learning tool, strategy, pathway, whatever it may be. So trying like building this MCPs and getting these tools to speak even better together is something I really look forward to. But the Gong integration that is with Spekit right now is awesome. Like it gives call details and call details and action items. And I know there's a lot on the roadmap you all have with the Gong integration that I, for one, am like super excited about. So, I'm excited about how these tools continue to like speak to one another and work together.
It's an exciting world. AI is changing everything. And in
Yeah.
this case, just AI is talking to each other is going to open up a lot of value. This one's probably more for you, Lisa. What changed for your team operationally when enablement moved like out of a portal and into the workflow?
It was definitely a behavior change, which I was a little surprised about because I'm like, it's right there. It lives on the side of your platform. But I think people are just so used to just like, they're like in this, like just focused in whatever that they're doing. And they didn't really realize at first the value it could bring. There were some, there's definitely the champions and those that are like ready to dive in, but like our more tenured reps who just are like, no, I know how to do this. I don't need this. It definitely took additional like, enablement and refreshes. And it's a behavior change across the org, right? Because typically, we would say, oh, here's the update and go to Confluence to find it. Whereas now, all of us are saying in department meetings when we're sharing updates, like, go look for it in Spekit or ask Spekit Sidekick if you have any questions, right? So it's also getting everybody else on board. Not that nobody wants to, and not that it's challenging at all to do so. It's just, you just have to remind people. What I will say, I wouldn't say it was hard to get them out of a separate like web app platform like Highspot because they weren't really using it that much. So it wasn't like that was a change. Honestly, I think they're like, it was just like a new thing that they just didn't really like fully understand what value it could bring immediately. And also I will say we rolled it out December 15th originally, which was right before the holidays. So it was a crazy time. But like once January came, we went back to them. We're like, okay, this is how you use it. This is the benefit it's going to bring. And on top of that, we also, like have been also like checking our metrics. Like I mentioned before, our team leaned heavily into the sales Slack channel to ask each other questions. Now we've seen a trend that there's less sales Slack questions, more questions in Spekit. So we're seeing growth and change there. I've seen people ask questions in sales Slack and someone else saying you can find that in Spekit. Or if they ask it in sales Slack and I know it's in Spekit, I will screenshot the sidekick and be like, here, you could ask it. Teaching people how to use it, a little bit. But otherwise, I think, people are like really seeing the value and really excited about it, which is great. And like getting managers on board was really important. So, like with anything, there's a behavior change, behavior curve, right? But I think it was definitely easier than if we were trying to adopt a platform, definitely, because I wasn't even going to try to readopt Highspot. I was like, we're just changing routes here.
Yeah, over a portal. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the, I could say from a marketing side, before I joined Spekit, I've frequently faced this kind of challenge. The problem is that, you create content, assets, information, and you try to get it to the sales reps. And you broadcast it. You're like, I'll send it to you in Slack. I'll send it to you in email. We'll do it at office hours. The challenge is for the rep, they are already at capacity doing their job and managing whatever regular change, like new sales process or different methodology or new talk track or new deck, like all that's going on all the time. And so it feels like we get up there in our bullhorn and we're like, "Rawr, rawr, rawr, there's a new whatever," and they can't hear it. It's like a brick wall, and that brick wall is just their job, right?
Yeah.
And it's such an operational gift to have, like, we know if a subject comes up, that this thing is going to, like, here's what you need to know. And it's like, it's going to be there. And the chance that they are going to be able to, like, not only see it, use it, internalize it is so much higher because they're actually going to be like in the moment doing the thing. And for us, that's been a big lift in our ability to reach reps. All right. I got, what do we got? I think we got like a 5-minute warning here. We're like 4.5 minutes, maybe 3.5 minutes left. So let's do a couple quick ones maybe. When you're evaluating platforms, what separates tools that reps want to use, and maybe this touches on your last question, versus tools that they try to work around? Like, was that part of, like, is that kind of what you saw? I think this person's saying, like, hey, how do you even know if this is going to be a tool that reps want to use? I think maybe that's what they're trying to ask.
My thought was like, why would they not want to use it? Right? Like that was it. I was like, this is a perfect solution for all the problems they're having. Like this is the solution. Like this is the only solution in my mind because of the rate of change, because of, like, even Ian, you mentioning them them having to adjust the transition of just like doing their job on a day to day. Like my thing, and I keep saying, I'm like, it takes out the guesswork for them. It gives them the tool that gives them the answers that they need when and where they need it. So I wasn't concerned that they were like, there's tool fatigue, right? And I will say, Justworks, we love tools. We love lots of tools. We're looking to consolidate. This is one of the tools that helps us to do that. So we're not shy against using tools, but this one felt like something that they was going to get a lot of benefit and value from. So I wasn't really, I was never really concerned on whether or not they were going to use it. I think, I just think with anything, it's a lot of just like refreshers, reminders, giving them support, giving them tools and tips and tricks. Like I had a lot more time to learn how to use a Sidekick. And granted, I don't think it takes very long at all, but some people, they need to see it and be walked through it to learn, right? Some people can just get hands on themselves and just learn how to use something. So I never really had that concern. My biggest concern was I mentioned we had like 2 weeks to actually transition. It was less than that. It was like 6 weeks, a month and a half. We signed with Spekit October 31st on Halloween. I was on my way to a Sabrina Carpenter concert, and we closed the deal, and we had to get it to our reps for December 15th because of the transition. So that to me, we were able to do it. Like we were able to build a platform and get it in a place that we were confident that they were going to have what they needed, like all of the marketing one-sheeters, all of the back end content. And, we're still continuing to build and iterate on it and continuing to, improve our reps' confidence in the platform as well. And I think that's a real big thing. Confident that when they go there, they're going to ask a question and they're going to get an answer. And if they don't get an answer, they're confident that my team will make sure that answer is in there the next time they go to look for it.
All right. I have been informed by our team that in 37 seconds, this thing just turns off. So I want to hit a couple of quick things. You're going to get a deal room. It's going to have this recording. It's going to have assets. Number two, if you want to read the book, spekit.com/book, request your free copy. We'd love to get it to you. Third, I'm going to read a question verbatim because it's great. I'm not new to Spekit. Love it. And the more people who use Sidekick, the faster they adopt using it. Great shout out. Thank you, Vinny. The question here is, how realistic is that merging sales reps will be transparent? I think you just have to ask them and see what they'll say there and judge it for yourself. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your time for joining us.
Thank you all.